In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Partly in view of the announcement just made about a special devotional service that we are instituting, I thought I'll say a few words about the qualities of sacredness of this particular season and of the month of May. Now, interestingly enough, the month of May in the northern hemisphere has been one of singular distinction for a very, very long time, longer than we are able to discern. For in pre-Christian times, in most of Europe, with maybe a particular focus in terms of history in the British Isles, there was always a series of celebrations with a special keynote. And this keynote was for what, for a better term, with Dr. Jung we may call the feminine principle. So the merry month of May was the month of the goddess. Well, with the coming of Christianity, that, like so many other good things, it still continued, but under a different name, and it became the month of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And I well remember, even over in Eastern Europe, in my native country, in the month of May, even though the let's say the Red Guards were looking in the door, we still had in all the churches we had special devotions to the Virgin Mary, probably about a couple of evenings a week, and so it was definitely considered the month of the Virgin. So it may be useful for us to contemplate that to some extent, because as I occasionally mention, the keynotes of the season, the calendric element in spirituality is an important one. There is not even the most rigid puritanical Calvinist Protestantism could completely do away with the festivals of the year. I think that Calvin would have been murdered if he had done away with Christmas, things like that. And you know what? We have to be charitable. Whether the world would have been better off if something like that happened, hard to tell. But in any event, let's say that there are keynotes, there are particular ways in which the psyche works, which we find at certain times of the year, and especially in the northern hemisphere, and so where in spring, the coming of the warmth and the light of the sun is a very important symbol. This has always been observed. Now, Easter usually falls a little bit earlier, April, or maybe sometimes even late in March, because the way Easter is calculated is a special thing. But by May, almost everywhere there you can notice spring. Even in cold and rainy and foggy England, where I have not been at that time of the year, has that keynote. And so this is the keynote of the renewal of life, and the renewal of life by way of the maternal and the feminine principle. And I think that's a very important thing to contemplate. If you look at church history and biblical history, you find various confirmations of the same. Now, in very short order, we will have the festival of the Ascension, when we extinguish the Easter candle, the Paschal candle, and which bears the symbolism of the rising of the Lord Christ to heaven after he resurrected and has come back and has been teaching the disciples. But he resurrects to heaven, and so other than spiritually, he is no longer here. But who is here? His mother, the Blessed Virgin. And it is the tradition holds that Pentecost, which is the next big holiday, when the apostles and disciples all get together and sort of reach decisions how to spread the faith in the future, that the assembly of the Christians at Pentecost is presided over by who? St. Peter? No. Virgin Mary. And there are beautiful paintings to that effect, artwork commemorating that. So that, let's say, this is the one who remains with us symbolically. And then, of course, she goes with Saint John, who is now her guardian and her adopted son, Saint John the Evangelist. They go to Ephesus, and she lives there according to the tradition. She lives there until what the Orthodox call the Dormition of the Holy Theotokos, when she dies, at which time also the mystery of her assumption into heaven, which has been a pious belief for many, many centuries, but was declared in the Roman Catholic Church as official dogma in the 1940s. I well remember the sound of the voice of Pope Pius XII on the radio, with my father and mother and myself kneeling in our kitchen when he proclaimed the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin. So let us say all of these indicates that this particular aspect of transcendence and of divinity is a very important one. And we know, of course, how tremendously, profoundly the Blessed Virgin is revered in the Orthodox Church. All the marvelous, miraculous Madonnas in Russia and in Greece and other places. So there is something, there are even other curious little synchronicities if you want to look at them. Now you all have at least heard of the miraculous apparition in Portugal at Fatima, which was an early part of our century. Now, Fatima is pronounced differently in Portuguese than it is in Arabic, but the word originates in Arabic, and it is, among others, is the name of the daughter, the only child of the Prophet Muhammad, Fatima. And if you ever go to Morocco or maybe to a trinket shop that sells Moroccan things, then you will find I have one on my desk, usually made out of glass or something of that sort, with Arabic inscriptions on it, or hand, which particularly is used in Morocco, and it is the hand of Fatima. Now, we are sort of under the impression culturally that the Arab cultures and maybe the Islamic religion itself is not terribly fond of the feminine, which is a contention that is itself dubious. But let us say all of the great spiritual leaders after the prophet, because there is only one prophet, he is the last one in Islam, but all the other great saintly figures in the Middle East of the Islamic religion all descend from Fatima, his daughter, because he had no son. And she married Ali, the first of the Imams of Shia Islam, who is at least, who in Shia Islam is revered about as much as the Prophet Muhammad himself, as a tremendously important saintly figure. And from then on, all the various dynasties of leaders, of kings, like, well, I am not going to try to keep track of them because I couldn't anyway, but let's say just as an example, the royal family of Jordan, which previously was also the royal family of Iraq, and the royal family of Jordan are very direct descendants of Ali, the grandson of the Prophet, and the son of his daughter. So you see, even that, and then we have the miraculous apparition of the Virgin in a country which by that time was, of course, Catholic, in Portugal, in a town called Fatima. Maybe pronounced a little bit differently from the Arabic Fatima, but it was still there. And also the appearance of the Virgin Mary, one of the most dramatic and really strange, miraculous events probably of church history. So somehow, if we may say so reverently, she, the Divine Lady, appears again and again. And I don't have the data with me, but over the last 100 or 150 years, the miraculous apparitions of the Virgin have been extremely numerous, more within that time than in all of history before, so I read. All of this should give us something to think of. Of course, different people interpret these events in their own way, and we should certainly have the freedom to interpret them also. But I think it is without doubt that there is in creation and beyond creation a principle that is a Madonna principle, a Sophia principle, whichever way we want to look at it, a psycho-spiritual power, which in a way may be referred to as feminine. So we have to be careful not to confuse, let's say, physiological masculinity and femininity with great archetypal transcendental figures like the Lord Christ or the Blessed Virgin Mary. Because that's not what we are dealing with here. But we have learned in modern depth psychology particularly that there are very, very important ways of looking at the masculine and the feminine, for instance, that are important, that they are here, and that is a spiritual femininity in this particular case. And so that is why the figure of the Blessed Mother, as she is also often referred to, the Theotokos, God's mother, as the Greeks call it, is a very, very important one. And it is important not primarily historically, but it is important in a deep spiritual way. I don't hesitate now, or I haven't hesitated at other times to say that I think that the figure of the Blessed Mother, or the Blessed Virgin, for instance, has been the principal saving grace of the Christian tradition. Because like any other traditions, Islamic or other Hindu or other, obviously as a tradition, spiritual tradition goes on throughout history, well, it becomes involved in various things that are not all that nice and all that commendable. And incidentally, I don't go along with the rote repetition of the things of, the Crusades. But if you know, that is not a very just accusation against Christendom, because the Crusades originated in circumstances which, if you and I had been Pope or Papist at that time, or things that we sure as heck would have preached the Crusade also. This was, just to mention it very quickly, it was the time of pilgrimages, when thousands and then thousands of people every year would pack up, often with just maybe a little loaf of bread and a bottle of wine with them, and wanted to make the pilgrimage to the Holy Land. And then what happened to them? They got captured on the way. They were sold into slavery. Terribly, and this went on for years and years and years. So finally, the leaders of Christendom got a little tired of that and said, well, look, why don't we send our guys here from Europe over there and make at least a safe way for the pilgrims to go, and where they can go and pray at the Holy Sepulchre and so forth. So that the Crusades were not some kind of a terrible miscarriage of justice, but a response to some very unpleasant stimuli, shall we say, and so on and so forth. But let us say Christendom, like any other religion that's around for thousands of years, has incurred in various bad reputations, has been involved in various things that are not all that commendable and so forth. And it could have been damaged much more severely if it hadn't been for the mysterious and miraculous figure of the Madonna. And so in many, many ways, really, the Madonna, which it just means Our Lady, my Lady, Madonna, is an extremely important figure in the history of Christendom, and we might say possibly in the history of the world and in the history of humanity. And she has supplied for these 2,000 and some years a maternal, a feminine, a kindly, an always forgiving and always loving keynote, which was often missing. It's quite important. In fact, one of the few events, but I'm sure that some historian would catch me on this one. One of the few events wherein a keynote of unconditional mercy is voiced in the mythos of an event is in the relatively newly born Divine Mercy tradition, voiced by Christ, the masculine figure, through Saint Maria Faustina Kozłowska. But the rest of it is almost inevitably always Marianic, always Madonna. And so it's a very, very wonderful thing, and one to be supremely grateful for. That throughout this long history of the culture and the faith of the culture, there was a figure there whom people could turn to when they felt they couldn't turn to anything else or anybody else. And somehow humanity had a mother in heaven, a celestial mother. And various people who had been pagans and probably had some similar figure in their own ancient faith, as is very likely on the British Isles and elsewhere. We haven't really found any evidence for the Hungarian people where I come from as to what precisely their pagan system of worship was. But once Christianity came, they became devotees of the Blessed Virgin in a big, big way. I'll never forget the thousands and thousands and 10,000s of people on the streets of Budapest in that must have been 1946 on the Festival of the Assumption, I think, singing these old hymns to the Virgin Mary. These are hymns that were composed and sung since about the year 1000, when Saint Stephen converted the country to Christianity. And the name, the Hungarian name for the Virgin is Boldog Asszony, which literally means happy woman. Although, Beatus, the blessed, in Latin is very similar to happy. And she, our great ancient patroness, please come and look at your people. And in the great basilica in Budapest, which is, the biggest church, there is the altar painting behind the high altar of Saint Stephen the King, kneeling and holding up his crown, holy crown as we call it, and the Blessed Virgin is there receiving it. Which is really a historical event, because Saint Stephen had an heir who himself was declared a saint later on, Saint Imre or Emmerich, but he died as a young man. And so the old king died without an heir, and certainly not an heir whom he could trust. And so he said, I will offer the crown to the Virgin, and she will become our queen. And so since she has not been called the Queen of Hungary as she has been declared in Poland more recently, the Polish Parliament some years ago officially proclaimed the Virgin Mary the Queen of Poland. And it was right now in the 21st century. Those Poles, they don't care. They will do what they want to do, And they may be poles apart from other people, but they will. But in any event, so since then, the Virgin has always been called Patrona Hungariae in Latin, the patroness of Hungary. And so the Marianic element was very, very, very powerful. And in other countries it is other. I understand from my friends who have gone there at various times that just about outside of the property of the Theosophical Society outside of Madras, which is now called something else, Chennai, in southern India, there is a shrine of the Virgin, not Kali or anybody else, but of the Blessed Virgin, the White Lady. And people come there from all over the place. And the people who come are Christians, they are Hindus, they are Muslims, they are Sikhs, whatever there is, they all come to the Lady. So, even obviously India is not a Christian country, but somehow she made a powerful appearance even there. And so I think it's important for us to remember. And while the names may vary and the various mythologies attached to it may vary, in Christendom it was primarily the mother of the Savior who was thus revered. But then there's the whole mysterious figure of the Lady Wisdom, Sophia, who has never been forgotten about in the Orthodox Church, but somewhat forgotten about in the Western Church. But let's say the feminine deific principle is present. And it has been of very great benefit to humanity, and it certainly will continue to be so. And it's important for us to keep these matters in mind, because those deific figures like Maria, Sophia, others whom we look up to and who become our spiritual mothers may be of very, very great help to us in our lives and in the life of humanity itself. And now we need to keep a straight attitude here. This is not a matter of changing the God image, you know, and as a priest friend of mine in New York once said, we don't want to have a Miss Jehovah. In other words, to put the Old Testamentary masculine, or some people call it patriarchal, qualities onto a feminine, but rather the balance of the two, which undoubtedly our souls and the souls of our culture require. And so maybe we want to do a little bit of meditating and praying and paying attention to this keynote now in the merry month of May, and realize that just like the May was considered a joyous time, it is also, with the maypole and so forth, it is also a devotional time to this mysterious figure of the one who has been proclaimed both mother and virgin, and really by others also the mother of the world. So we'll try to do a little of that, and we'll make a good beginning toward it on the 20th of May in the evening, if you care to come and be with us at that time. Show me the mystery of that which hangs twixt heaven and earth, descend upon us and remain with us always.